Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar titled Becoming a CX Hero, the top 5 customer experience mistakes that cost you customers. I'm David Chan, CEO of Intellex, where we are making real estate social. I'll be moderating today's webinar, but before we get started, here's a few housekeeping notes. All participants will be on mute during the webinar. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section. We'll be monitoring the chat and answer as many questions as we can during the allotted time. Following the webinar, we will be posting a link to the recording within a couple of days so that we'll be sure that you can look at it again if you need to. And all attendees will receive the first copy of our ebook, Redefining Customer Experience in the Digital Age. Now I'd like to introduce to you our 3 panelists, starting with David Shafer. Dave is an advertising industry veteran with 25 years in strategy and creative roles at agencies leading marketing efforts for brands like Dell, Intuit, PayPal, and AARP. He is currently the founder of Gangbusters, where his team helps high engagement brands grow by rethinking all aspects of the customer experience. Next up is Priscilla Huang, head of experience design and digital analytics at AIA Insurance. With over 18 years of multidisciplinary skills in tech, UX, and product, Priscilla is passionate about combining all 3 to craft simple yet delightful user experiences that produce strategic business outcomes. And finally, we have Calixto, who's the CTO of UserSight. Calixto wrote his first computer command when he was 4 and got his first company acquired when he was 20. He believes that user experience has to be the focus for any digital platform to be meaningful and valuable to the users. I'd like to now share the agenda for today so you know what each topic is going to be covered. David's going to talk to us today about achieving customer experience excellence by recognizing that your customers are the heroes through every step of their journey with you. Then Priscilla will follow that with what stands in your way of becoming a guide worth following to hero status throughout the user journey, recognizing and avoiding the 5 most common mistakes. And finally, Calixto will talk to us about how technology is being leveraged to uncover hard to reach user sentiment and how it's unlocking the ability for companies to improve their user journey. So with that, I would like to turn the floor over to David Shafer to talk to us about customer experience excellence.
All right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about exactly what David said, customer experience excellence. What does it mean? Is it hard? And really, what's the intention behind it? So let's start off with a quote, if I can get this working. And clicking. There we go. I love this quote. It's easier to love a brand when the brand loves you back. Today, we all have a strong desire to be appreciated and to feel special by the brands that we interact with. We also have a mouse and a click button that's right next to us to click away when we don't feel special from that brand. So it really is incumbent upon all marketers and all brands to be in the moment and be lovable. So let's talk about what customer experience really is and give it a definition. Taking me a minute to click these things. Here we go. So what is customer experience? It's the art and science of coaxing lifetime loyalty from daily interactions. If you think about that, that's the same thing as having a relationship with someone, a family or a friend member, where you're listening, you're responding, you're having interactions in real time, and that amounts to something special over the long haul. So I really like the idea of thinking about customer experience that way. But the problem is traditional corporate structures that we create and we work in make it next to impossible to deliver a comprehensive customer experience strategy. So what's in the way? Tech jargon is often in the way, and people think it's harder than really what it is. It's not hard to have a relationship with somebody and ask them questions and listen to answers, but it seems to be more technically difficult when we try to apply that concept for brands. Gurus and solos, people that are so important that everything needs to flow through them. These are the types of interactions that will stifle a good customer experience. HIPPOs, if you've never heard that term, highest, oh my God, I forgot what it's called. Most important person's opinion in the room is what a HIPPO is. And if you make your decisions based on just leadership desires, you're going to be doing the wrong thing. Wrong intention is one, thinking that customers want to hear about your product when really they want to hear about how you're going to solve their problem. There's a difference there. And then who's in charge of the customer needs? Who's in charge at your organization of making customers feel loved? Oftentimes there's not a person. Moving on. So here's the truth. I hope you write this down. And you can Google this and you can see this stat everywhere. Customers value the experience you deliver more than the products or services that you create. The tide has turned already. So right now, 86% of buyers will pay more for a better customer service. There's plenty of stats that say more than half will leave if they're unhappy. But the big number here is that by 2020, which is already passed, customer experience will overtake price and product as a key product differentiator, key brand differentiator. So you think about the 4 Ps. Now we have customer experience. So what do you do in this situation? Having worked with a lot of organizations, I find it's easy to tell a story, to use data and a storytelling technique to get people to align on what they need to accomplish. So the holy grail here is a simple narrative fueled by data that empowers your organization to habitually deliver on customer needs at every critical moment. The habitually part is important because it's not a stop and think, it's a do it and set it and forget it because you're in a relationship and this is how you're going to behave. So one technique that I find useful is the hero's journey when you're thinking about customer experience. And this is a movie making technique. You might have heard of it. And I've also included a worksheet behind this where there's more detail on how to do this. And I routinely help clients do this. But basically it goes like this. Your client or your customer is the hero and they uncover a problem. Whether they uncover the problem themselves or you help them understand that problem, it's uncovered. And that creates a need state for them. And when that need state is created, they need to solve that problem. The way that they'll solve that problem is to go and search for a guide. Your brand is the guide. So you need to become a guide worth following. You need to be ready to accept their questions and their problems and take them along a journey with you. The guide always has to have a good plan. That's typically the marketing. And then together they take action on behalf of the hero. And in the end, 2 things need to happen. One is we avoid problems. So you're going to help your customers avoid problems. And then you're also going to help your customers find success. So it's really important, just like any good story or movie, to have problems, to have an enemy that you're fighting, and to be vigilant against that enemy in order to find the success that you need. So if you take this mindset and then apply the data to it, which we're going to get to in the second half of this, that gives you enough information that you need in order to change the experience at every point. Let me show you how that works. So I'm not going to go into this, but this is takeaway for you guys. This is what I just talked about, the narrative that defines the brand's role in customers' lives. The key questions that you're going to ask are this: Who are your best customers? Not your worst customers, not the customers that sales wants to go after, not the customers that the CEO wants to go after, but your best possible customers. And what are their needs? What are their pain points? What do they value most that only you can give them? So if they value X and your competitor can give them X just the same as you, maybe you want to talk about something else. What's standing in the way of them getting what they want? It's really important to be empathetic and to understand where people are in a journey, especially if it's B2B, where it's a complex journey. Like I said, who is the enemy? What is the hero trying to achieve? If it's a B2B purchase, they're trying to, avoid risk, look good, win the day. If it's a B2C purchase, there's usually some mindset that they're trying to fulfill. And this is core. How does your brand behave? It's not about what you say, it's about what you do and the core values that are on display. When you ask these questions, I'm not going to go into this map, but when you ask these questions, you can create this journey map or empathy map. And the important things here, this is one for choosing an airline, and I just created it because it's choosing travel. I created it because it's a simple example. But on the left side, you have, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What do they want right now? And what are they doing? And then along the top, you have the stages of anybody booking a trip. I need a holiday. All right, well, I'm feeling down right now. That's what I'm thinking. And what I'm doing is talking with friends about good places to get away. And then when I start researching, my energy goes up. I feel better about it. And what am I doing there? So this type of map gives you the locations and the feelings of all of your best customers throughout the journey. When you have that in hand, you know how to act and you know how to behave. And with that, I will turn it over to Priscilla.
Thank you, David. Just a quick note on what you just said. I know that the time has passed, or passing it on to millennials and Gen Zs, where they really care about customer experience more so than what previous generations cared about. So what you said is absolutely true. Thank you for that presentation. Now, Priscilla, thank you for talking to us now about the top 5 customer experiences that people should avoid going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Yeah, and Dave, I couldn't agree with you more that customer journey, it's absolutely critical in framing our hero's journey. And in order to create that delightful customer experience, I'm going to share with you these 5 top CX mistakes you must never make again. Right. Mistake 1 is not having data on hand for your CX teams to learn fast and respond quickly. So how many companies do we know that rely on disconnected legacy systems that don't even talk to each other, right? Because like Dave said, they're all siloed. And because of this, it's not uncommon to see whole teams that are being dedicated to this tedious task of manually extracting, consolidating, and then mapping data into Excel files for analysis. But by the time this data is finally reported, that data is often, it's already outdated and it's irrelevant. How then can we expect our CX teams to stay responsive and learn quickly? And while talking to users, it's great for gathering feedback, yeah? But sometimes we just need simple observations for quick learning. And in such cases, conducting full-blown user research, right? It's just too time-consuming. It takes up to 2 months. So instead, CX teams, they need an automated and continuous feedback loop integrated into their workflow to respond quickly. So what we need to do here, we need to automate that data collection process, and we need to insist on real-time data for our CX teams, right? So that they can always stay on the pulse of their hero's journey. The second cardinal sin of CX is passively waiting for your customer to give you feedback. One of the biggest fears of any brand is managing customer complaints on social media. So don't just rely on damage control when this happens, because your brand reputation, it takes a huge hit that you may not always recover from. So to avoid this embarrassment, simply just proactively seek out your customers' feedback. right? That way, when you hear negative feedback, you get to contain it, you get to control it internally, instead of letting your frustrated customers lash out on social media. And as a bonus, if you do manage to resolve your customers' pain points, you'll not only improve your hero's journey, you'll probably convert that detractor into a loyal brand ambassador.
I could not agree with you more, Priscilla. I think tying social media into your brand's reputation is really important. It makes a lot of sense to me. And especially what I was just previously mentioning, that Gen Z and millennials really do care about social media, and they really do want to hear customer feedback right away from the brand.
Absolutely, David. And just because you mentioned this, I'll give you a nugget of gold here, right? Applying this one tip at AIA, this raised our App Store rating from 1.2 stars to 4 stars in just 2 weeks, right? And as you can see over here, right? We had way more ratings, and we had, most importantly, they were all positive ratings that, they managed to trigger Apple's rating algorithms, and they increased our app rating by over 3 times. So I wish we had time to cover this today, but if there's enough interest from the panelists, from the audience, I would love to share the strategy and the playbook behind this one, because it's so easy, but it's so effective. Yeah, guys, if you want to hear about this, just leave a note in the comments or something, and let David know. I'm sure he'll organize something. But meanwhile, let's talk about mistake 3. So this is something that happens a lot in small companies where everyone is encouraged to give their opinions. And this is great. But this also happens in large companies where the hippo, or the highest paid person in the room, he makes an offhand comment, and then everybody rushes to build it. So I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, right? So while trusting your gut instinct isn't always a bad thing, decisions based on bias and subjectivity means that we are building for our hippo rather than our hero. So rather than argue with speculative opinions, we should let data lead the way. Combine data from what your customers are doing and thinking, and use that to legitimize your decisions. By anchoring your decision in data-driven insights, you can avoid the conflict with your hippo while still providing assurance that your decisions are grounded in solid data. As the saying goes, our hero is always right. Let data show you the way. But having data alone, it isn't enough. You need to know what to do with it. So for example, let's look at a common CX metric, right? It's called time spent on page. So what's a good gauge of this? Is 3 seconds too short? Does it mean that your users are not engaged, and should you try to make them stay longer? But what if I told you that this metric is actually a reflection of how user-friendly your product is? That your product is so intuitive that users know exactly how to find what they need and complete their tasks and just leave in 3 seconds. Once you see it this way, perhaps 3 seconds isn't that bad after all. So now that even if you know how to interpret the metric, you still need to know what to aim for. How should you improve this metric? What do you benchmark against? And what is the industry norm for products like your own? So don't just guess the answer. Make sure your CX team is armed with actionable insights to steer them towards the right direction. Again, like they say, if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. So earlier you saw that there are 2 types of data, the doing data and the thinking data. Popular tools like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Crazy 8, Hotjar, they only measure the doing part, but not the thinking part, right? It doesn't tell you what your customers are thinking. So for example, let's revisit that metric again, time spent on page. This analytics, it tells us 3 seconds is acceptable within the industry. But does it mean that your product is really easy to use? Does it mean that, does it not just mean that your customers could have grudgingly learned to work around your painful workflows? How do you know that they are not silently hating on your product? And if that is so, what happens when the next product comes along and it removes that pain point for them? Unfortunately, you're going to lose those customers. So experience is more than just numbers. You need to understand how your heroes truly feel in order to empathize with their needs and make meaningful improvements to your product before they churn. So these are the 5 mistakes, but before that, I'm going to leave you the thought here. A brand today is no longer what we tell the customer it is what the customers tell each other it is. So what kind of experience will you build for your brand? What will your heroes say about your brand? Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. That was wonderful. I think this is great experience for people to understand what things to avoid when they're trying to work with their brand and their customers. And so I saw a question in the chat session, which I'm sure Calixto will be able to answer during his presentation. So just before we go into Calixto's presentation, at Intellex, we're using AI-powered technology to help customers discover, negotiate, and eventually buy real estate. And at UserSight, they're leading the charge in leveraging AI to aid customer experience. Calixto, please share your thoughts with the audience about how AI is helping with these kind of analytics.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Let me move my slides. It's taking a while to move. Right. So when we look at how existing how organizations are using matrices to measure their CX pain points right now, we see them using matrices like daily monthly active users, install rate, uninstall rate, average engagement durations, time spent on page, like what Priscilla has mentioned. We see organizations using things like bounce rate, heat maps as well, using common tools such as Adobe Analytics, Google Analytics, Firebase, Mixed Pixels, and so on and so forth, right? When we are measuring all these matrices, what are we actually measuring? We are actually measuring just the user actions, right? What are the users actually doing on your digital platforms as well as services? And why are we measuring this? We are measuring this in order to try to guess, try to infer, what are the actual user sentiments? What are their actual thoughts and experience? So we see how users are moving through our site. We see how users are moving through our mobile app to try to guess, how they feel about using it. So what if it's a better idea? Isn't it a better idea if we can measure these sentiments directly, right? And there has been fair attempt to try to measure these sentiments directly in the industry right now. People have been using paper surveys, email surveys, doing online surveys, customer service calls. Even the hottest hit in the block now is social listening, right? But what are the disadvantages, or rather, what are the challenges with using these methods, right? When you're doing manual email surveys, you're doing calls, you're doing paper survey, it's slow to administrate, right? You need someone to manually assign, to target your segment, who are the guys, who are the users, which are the customers you want to administrate the survey to. And when you collect all this data, how do you actually go through it? How do you actually process it in order to derive insights out of it? If you are doing a survey for maybe 50 respondents, 100 respondents, maybe you can still look through the survey response manually. But if you are doing surveys at scale, like let's say you want to get the sentiments of hundreds and thousands of users or customers, how do you actually go through all this different feedback and all these survey results and derive insights out of it, right? So those are the challenge. And because things like paper surveys, emails, calls has been ongoing for the longest time, people get so used to it, they tend to just ignore it, they tend to just skip it, they don't react to that. So in a lot of these cases, the response rate is really low, right? And in a lot of these cases as well, this kind of surveys normally take place days or even weeks after the users are actually engaged with you. So let's say the user is using your app or using your website. A few days later, they receive a phone call, they receive an email asking about their experience. By then, most of the time the users have already forgotten about their experience. So what kind of results are you actually collecting in those cases? In many cases, it's not so accurate, right? And we talk about social listening. Many companies and many organizations have been saying that social listening is a way for them to understand, how are they doing in CX, how are they doing customer experience? Because if people are saying good things on social media about the brand or about the organization, then their CX is good. If their customers have been saying, negative things about the organizations, they could have a lousy customer experience. But in our world, we feel that, if we are relying on social listening, it's already too late. All the negative comments or feedbacks are already out there in the wild, on the social media platforms, right? So how can we actually try to capture this feedback? How can we actually get this internally before it goes to the public, right? So, and to the point about, having to manually look through all the different feedback, all the different survey results that, we have received, what if we could actually use AI to derive insights? What if we can actually use AI to just read through all the hundreds and thousands of feedback so that we don't have to look at it manually, but we still can get the insights. We still can, know where are the problem areas, right? So this one example, let's say someone gave a feedback to you. Overall, I love this application as the design is quite user-friendly. I especially love the use of mascots for the fund transfer process. This really helps make the process friendly, right? So what AI can do is to pick up interesting tidbits, interesting metadata from this. We can actually pick up, okay, because the user say, I love this actually a positive sentiment feedback. And these are the topics that the user has been talking about, ease of use, the speed, as well as the mascot. And this whole feedback, this whole sentiment, these topics actually relates to the fund transfer user journey, right? So these are the interesting tidbits, and this is actually a very good summary of what this feedback is about, right? So when AI is able to pick up all this information, you don't have to read through every single feedback anymore, right? So when you have hundreds and thousands of feedback results that you have collected, you can make use of AI to actually get these insights out of it rather than looking at it manually. So this is another example. Let's say a user says, terrible, the app crashes all the time when I'm trying to apply for a new loan, right? So with the AI, we are able to tell, it's negative sentiment, the user is talking about stability of the mobile app, and the user journey that this pertains to is actually the loan application process, right? So with these things in mind, right, our company, UserSight, what we have came out with is essentially, automating the whole process of collecting the thoughts and experience, as well as using AI to crunch through all this feedback and responses, right? So with the automation, what we have is we actually have a SDK that can be easily embedded into your digital platforms, be it your websites, mobile apps. And what the SDK do is that it can automatically administrate the surveys to your users. So you can target users, you can decide, how frequently you want to get a survey, and the SDK will take care of all this for you. And because we are using AI to process all this feedback we have collected, you are no longer limited by the speed of human reading through feedbacks that we have collected. So it becomes very scalable. You can collect anything from 10 feedbacks a day to hundreds and thousands of feedbacks a day for some of our customers. And you can instantly get the result. You can instantly get the insight out of that, right? So with all these insights we have, we present it on a very interesting and very simple dashboard for our UX, for your UI, UX designers, or it could be for your platform owners, or it could even be for your management level to look at, how the customer experience is doing for your digital platform. So with UserSight and the things that we have been building and things that we are working on, you can become a CX hero, like was mentioned by David earlier, right? And these are your new superpowers. With UserSight, you can instantly understand and identify user needs from thousands and hundreds and thousands of feedback just using AI, right? And you can measure user feedback surveys across all your digital platforms with a centralized view, right? So imagine, your organizations could have hundreds of mobile apps or hundreds of websites with multiple touch points with your customers. All this gets consolidated, all the feedback across all these different platforms get consolidated into one centralized view. And what we do, like the example earlier, we are able to tell you, what are the user journey that has positive sentiments, what are the user journeys that has maybe slightly more negative sentiments, and what are the topics that users are talking about with regards to each of those user journeys. So you can actually look at the user journey and what's wrong with that user journey, so you can really drill down on that. And because of all these capabilities, you can rapidly iterate on your UX, UI, on your customer experience, and continue to use UserSight to verify that new changes you have made are actually making an impact. Sorry, David, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Calixto.
Hey, no problem. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions from the audience. One gentleman asked if you have mentioned rating algorithms. Is it based on heuristics?
Right. So
yeah, Calixto, I think this one for because previously when we were working on this, I think we realized that it's not that easy to be able to trigger the App Store rating, especially for the native in-app pop-up. Yeah, and that's where Calixto really came in, and he really shed some light into how the Apple algorithm works. So yeah, I would love for you to share a bit more on this.
Right. So I think the really important thing for organizations like AIA is that the mobile apps that their customer use is really important part of the whole business. And when you have low ratings, what happens on App Store, on Play Store, is that they actually rank you much further down, as compared to your competitor, right? So that's what's happening. And for AIA, I think at the point of time where what Priscilla shared was, 1st June, the rating was 1.2 out of 5. And it's not to AIA, it's actually not to AIA's fault, right? The user experience is actually decent. We actually didn't have a lot of complaints from the customer support team. I mean, the customer support team are not getting a lot of complaints from the users. There's no major negative items, right? So it's just a matter of, people who are more dissatisfied are the ones who are more vocal about how they feel, leaving the feedback. So there's an inherent bias to the whole App Store rating. So what we do at UserSight, and we will consider this as a side effect, is that we actually look at who are the users, what kind of feedback they have been giving us, what kind of feedback they have been giving to UserSight, and we know, okay, this group of users, they are the happy users. This group of users, they are the slightly dissatisfied user. Dissatisfied users, we move them to the support team to take care of them. Happy users, we prompt them, would you like to help us by giving us a positive feedback on the Play Store, App Store, right? I mean, just giving us a feedback on the Play Store and App Store. And that worked out really well, right? Within 2 weeks, we actually boost our rating to 3.9. And these are real ratings. These are real feedbacks from actual users, right? And it actually, because of these ratings, it actually boosts the whole search engine, I mean, the App Store engine ranking of AIA's app as well. Yeah. So I think it's a long answer, but I hope that sort of answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apart from this, I remember. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Apart from this, I do remember Calixto. He gave me a little tidbit that was really useful. He actually told me that, oh, did you know that only the first 3 ratings submitted by every single user in every year is being recorded, by Apple's algorithm, and that Apple and Google, they change algorithms. Like one of the recent changes was like your ratings are affected by the recency. So that also made a huge difference because previously we only had people who were unhappy with our app, and then these people, even though they're few and far between, they came in and they really dragged down our rating. But once we installed this with UserSight, we had this huge influx of ratings, all positive, and it helped to boost our ratings up to 4.0. It's like 2 weeks we were floored. We never expected that kind of a result as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That experience you had in 2 weeks turnaround. Calixto, we have another question. With a tool like UserSight, is user behavior analytics still necessary?
Well, I think yes. You can potentially, while you can still potentially just make use of UserSight alone, right? Some of our clients have also found success using a combination of sentiment analytics like UserSight, as well as the traditional behavior analytics, like looking at the heat map, looking at the screen session that I've mentioned earlier. So how do they do that? They do that by first using UserSight to identify, what are the broad areas, what are the user journeys that have a lower customer satisfaction score or lower customer experience score. And then once they have identified these user journeys, then they use the traditional, behavior measurement like heat map and screen recording and things like that to look into detail on, at a screen by screen basis, what are the issues with those particular screens, right? So that's one way we have seen, a number of our customers do. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrific. And another question came up with all these, sophisticated tools and reporting capabilities in AI. Is it complicated to implement and deploy? I mean, how long does it actually take?
Right. So just a bit of tidbit. Just for AIA alone, we actually deployed to over 60 of their platforms in 8 countries throughout the whole COVID period, right? Without actually meeting anyone. And for each of these platforms, what we do is that we actually spend just 2 hours with the platform owners together with AIA's developers. So it could be their own developers, it could be, third-party developers, just 2 hours. We are able to, tell them what they know, what they need to know. And from there, they are able to, do the implementation on their own. And this is because, UserSight, the way we design the system and the way we build the system, it takes care of all the AI portion, all the heavy lifting, right? So all the client organization have to do is just add in a few lines of code, include our SDK, and that's it, right? You get the data, you get the dashboard, it starts working, right?
Yeah, that's terrific. There's a question for David about how brands today, outside of using these types of tools, how are they collecting these types of insights for customer experience? Is it exactly what Calixto says, like emails? And I'm kind of
yeah, it's that, or it's often just a lot of hearsay, to be honest. And if you think about it, Google's given us a way to collect information at the bottom of the funnel. We know what's happening at sales, when it's happening, and how it's happening. We don't know what's happening before that, when users are on your site, when they're thinking, when they're feeling, when they're doing, when they're searching. So you need systems like this in order to capture that before you get to the sale, right? If you're at a sales conversation and you're not prepared, or you don't know how they got here, you're not going to probably have a good sales conversation if that's the way your sale goes. So it really is about I think from the business standpoint, it's about trying to create efficiency of a sale. So you're always trying to innovate, make it a better experience for them, and more efficient process of creating revenue for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, back to my point earlier about the new generation of users they want instantaneous results. They want they're on social media all the
digital.
time.
Yeah.
They're all digital natives. And so this kind of technology and usage, and also they don't want to click through surveys. I don't want to click through surveys. I'd rather just say, I don't like this, or I don't like that. I like this better. And be able to have you, the brand, figure out from what I'm saying, rather than writing all these surveys or answering all these questions. That to me is intrusive.
It feels good to have someone ask you how you feel, even if it's a survey online. And that's a much better experience than trying to guess what people feel and then putting them in a pressured sales conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Calixto, there was another question for you. Do my existing platform developers need to be familiar with the technologies for them to be able to implement a tool like UserSight?
Right. So okay. I think it's quite similar to the earlier question, right? So they don't have to be, right? So as long as your developers could be familiar with iOS native development or Android native development, whichever platform or SDK that they build your mobile app on or your website on, that is the language that they need to be familiar with in order to integrate UserSight. So whatever they are familiar with right now is sufficient, right? So we have SDK in all the different languages that most guys are deploying to. So it's just a natural fit for them. Yeah.
Oh, terrific! Yeah, those are the kinds of things that are really important for any brand to implement, because they probably don't
Definitely.
They have limited number of resources, lots of brands, and
For
they
sure,
rather
for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. They don't have to learn any new thing, right? So whatever they already know, that's sufficient to implement this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's terrific. So this has been a great session on experiences on how to make your customer experience better. Are there any final thoughts of the panelists? I just wanted to let the audience know that UserSight is offering a free 1-hour workshop for the first 5 customers who requested by June 17th. They will help you with your journey map, your CX mapping, your KPIs, and an in-depth demo. So please do reach out to Ryan Latham at usersight.io. That's Ryan. But are there any final thoughts from the panelists about what we just discussed today, or any final questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us, and a great job by the panelists. Remember, we will send you out the link to this recording when we're done, and also a copy of the wonderful ebook that Calixto has written about the customer experience. Thank you all. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the week.